Welcome to the Lonely Star. We're always trying to uncover something new, something hidden.
Right. Always digging deeper.
And today we're diving into a world that's all around us, but often speaks in whispers. A hidden language. The language of symbols in art.
A silent vocabulary.
I like that. According to our research, sometimes the most ordinary objects in a painting, a sculpture, even a building, they're not just there for decoration.
Oh, absolutely not. They're like clues.
Yeah, clues. And they can unlock a deeper understanding of what the artist was really trying to say, or even reveal something about the time they lived in.
It's like you see a bowl of fruit, and suddenly you're not just looking at apples and pears. You're seeing, I don't know, temptation, abundance, maybe even decay.
Exactly. And today we're going to try and decipher some of that code for you, the listener. We want to give you a new set of eyes, a way to see art, not just for its beauty, but for the stories it's telling, the ideas it's whispering.
The stories beneath the surface.
Exactly. And believe me, we're going to be looking at everything from intimate, still life paintings to grand, sweeping frescoes.
Oh, get ready for some perspective shifts.
You got that right. But the thing is, these symbols, they're not always straightforward.
Right, because a symbol's meaning can change depending on the time period, the culture, even the artist's own perspective.
It's like learning a language, but with all these different dialects. Okay, let's start simple. Imagine a beautiful still life painting, a basket overflowing with fruit.
Seems straightforward enough, right?
Yeah, just colors and shapes, capturing a moment of everyday life.
But, according to our research, even something as simple as a basket of fruit can be incredibly symbolic. Let's take the apple, for example. If you see an apple in a painting, especially one with religious themes,
Well,
that's the first thing that comes to mind.
well, for me, it's the Garden of Eden, right? That forbidden fruit, the story of Adam and Eve.
Exactly. Temptation, knowledge, the fall from grace. But shift the scene. Ancient Greece. What about grapes?
Grapes. I think of Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry. So maybe pleasure, indulgence, even a little bit lust.
Precisely. And what about the pomegranate? A fruit with a very distinct structure.
Pomegranates. I know they were connected to Persephone, the queen of the underworld.
Right. And that association brings in themes of what?
Cycles, maybe?
Yeah.
Life and death and the journey between them. Oh, and didn't Persephone eating pomegranate seeds in the underworld bind her to that realm?
Exactly. It's often linked to the consummation of marriage, a binding commitment. It can even symbolize, more broadly, female sexuality.
Wow. So even just within the category of fruit, we have all these layers of meaning.
All depending on the context. And it highlights how important it is to understand the cultural background, the historical period when we look at art.
You're right. You can't just identify the object. You have to understand the world it existed in.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of context, let's look at Caravaggio. He painted these incredible still lifes, but they weren't always, well, let's just say not all of his fruit baskets looked delicious.
Right. He had a knack for capturing decay.
Exactly. Some of his fruit is rotting. There are insects crawling around. Why do you think an artist would depict something that's supposed to be beautiful and nourishing in such a state?
Well, it was definitely deliberate. And remember, Caravaggio was working during a very tumultuous time in Italy, the Reformation and Counter-Reformation.
So much upheaval, so much change. Do you think maybe the decaying fruit was a reflection of that?
It's possible. It could symbolize a perceived decay within the church itself, or even just the fragility of earthly power in the face of such dramatic change.
A hidden commentary on the state of the world. Powerful. Let's move on to another symbol that appears again and again in art across cultures and throughout history. The skull. What message do you think artists were trying to convey with the skull?
Well, the skull is a very direct memento mori.
Memento mori.
Yeah, it's a Latin phrase meaning remember that you will die. It's a stark reminder of our mortality.
So it was meant to, what?
Yeah.
Make people think about their lives, their actions?
Exactly. To encourage reflection, to not get too attached to material possessions or worldly pleasures because, well, death comes for us all.
A little grim, but I guess an important message.
It is, and even within that single meaning, there can be nuances. Think of Paul Cézanne, the artist known for his exploration of form and color. In his later works, he started incorporating skulls into his still lifes. What do you make of that?
That's interesting. Cézanne's so focused on the physical world, the visual experience, and then he brings in the skull.
What do you think it says about his mindset as he got older?
Maybe facing his own mortality.
Well,
That awareness of his own finite existence started creeping into his art.
a very plausible interpretation. And often he'd juxtapose the smooth, cold surface of a skull with the vibrant colors and textures of fruit.
That contrast, I see it. Life and death, right there in the same frame.
It's
Unsettling.
it's meant to be a potent reminder of the balance, the fragility.
Okay, let's move on to another object that plays with light and shadow. The candle. What kind of symbolic weight does a flickering flame carry in art?
Well, a lit candle can represent a lot of things. Light itself, for one. And with that comes truth, knowledge, enlightenment.
Right, like a beacon in the darkness.
Exactly. And in a religious context, it can also symbolize faith, the divine light of God.
Okay, I can see that. But what about when a candle is extinguished?
Well, that almost always signifies loss, the end of something, often the end of life.
It definitely has a more somber feeling, like in Van Gogh's Still Life with Bible.
Ah, yes. A very poignant work. You have an open Bible, a secular book, and a snuffed-out candle. What do you think Van Gogh was trying to say there?
Well, it's interesting because his father was a minister, and the painting was created shortly before his father died.
So the extinguished candle could represent...
His father's life coming to an end.
Yeah.
But then you have the Bible next to a book that seems less spiritual.
And that's where the interpretation gets really interesting. Some people see it as a reflection of Van Gogh's own struggle with faith. He tried to be a minister, but it didn't work out, so that path, like the candle, extinguished.
Wow, I didn't know that. So even a simple still life can hold so much personal meaning. Okay, let's talk about flowers. They're usually associated with beauty, right?
Absolutely. But like everything else we've talked about, flowers have layers of meaning. A bouquet in full bloom can symbolize life, growth, faith, abundance, all those positive things.
But then, of course, flowers wilt and die.
Right, which brings in those themes of fragility, the transient nature of beauty, the fact that nothing lasts forever.
A reminder that time marches on.
Exactly. But it goes even deeper than that. Specific types of flowers have very specific meanings, like words in a language.
Really? So it's not just about whether they're blooming or wilting.
Not at all. For example, poisonous nightshade.
That sounds ominous.
It is. It often symbolizes danger, deception, things like that. Then you have daisies, usually representing innocence and purity.
Makes sense. And poppies.
Poppies can be associated with sleep, but also death.
I see. So much meaning packed into a single flower.
And of course, the red rose, that timeless symbol of love, romance, sometimes even passion and seduction.
Wow, a whole floral vocabulary. We could spend a whole episode just on that.
We could. But for now, let's consider the work of Rachel Roisch. She was a Dutch painter, famous for her incredibly detailed flower paintings.
I've seen her work. Stunning. So much detail. But were her paintings just about botanical beauty?
Well, that's the thing. She often depicted flowers that bloom in different seasons, all together in the same voice.
So she wasn't just capturing a specific moment in time. Why would she do that?
Well, remember, she was known for her realism. So by placing these flowers together, she was showcasing her knowledge. It was almost like saying, look, I understand the natural world so well that I can bend its rules.
Ah, I see. So it was a display of both her artistic skill and her scientific understanding.
Exactly. Each flower was carefully chosen, not just for its beauty, but for its symbolic meaning and its place in the cycle of life.
Fascinating. Okay, let's move on to another reflective object that appears in art throughout history. The mirror. What secrets are being reflected back at us?
Mirrors can work on multiple levels. Sometimes when you see someone looking into a mirror, it's about introspection, self-examination.
Like confronting truths about themselves, good or bad.
Right. And often, mirrors are paired with other symbolic objects that add to the meaning. What if you see a mirror next to a scale, for example?
A scale. That makes me think of balance, justice, maybe truth?
So the mirror reflecting the scale, could it be about the pursuit of truth through self-reflection?
Looking inward to find balance, to weigh one's actions. I like that.
And of course, if you put a mirror next to a skull.
Right, there's that memento mori again. Even more potent with the reflection.
Absolutely. But mirrors can also be about how we present ourselves to the world, our outward image.
Okay, so internal and external. Like in those European paintings where women are often gazing into mirrors. I always thought those were about vanity.
That's definitely a common interpretation, especially in those paintings where the focus seems to be on beauty and adornment. Maybe a commentary on societal expectations for women.
Makes sense. But what about in other cultures? Like in Japanese woodcuts, mirrors are often depicted in scenes of women grooming themselves. Is that also about vanity?
Not necessarily. In Japanese culture, there's a strong emphasis on ritual and self-care.
Right. It's not just about looking good. It's about the process, the care you take with yourself.
Exactly. So in those woodcuts, the mirror might represent a different kind of beauty, a beauty that's connected to tradition, to self-respect, to a kind of inner harmony.
Hmm. Again, so much depends on the context. Okay, let's shift gears completely. We've been talking about these intimate still life paintings, but now let's go big. Let's talk about Michelangelo's Last Judgment.
Ah, monumental work.
It's overflowing with figures and symbolism. Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with the most obvious visual element, light and darkness. They're not just there for dramatic effect. How are they used in the composition?
There's a very clear divide, right? One side bathed in light, the other shrouded in darkness.
Exactly. And what do you think each side represents?
Well, the light side, it feels hopeful. You see angels, the righteous ascending to heaven.
It's associated with the divine, with joy, with salvation, and the dark side.
That's where you see the demons, the damned being dragged down to hell.
It embodies evil, the unknown, the ultimate consequence of sin. And fire plays a big role on that dark side, doesn't it?
It does. And in this context, fire definitely doesn't seem like a good thing.
Right. Here it represents the eternal punishment, the torment of hellfire.
It adds to the overall feeling of dread and finality. And the demons themselves, they're pretty terrifying.
They are, and they often symbolize those internal struggles, the temptations, the vices that lead people astray.
Like they're making those inner battles external. I see. We've talked about the serpent before. What about in this context?
Well, in the Last Judgment, the serpent is definitely not a symbol of healing or renewal. It's back to its more traditional meaning, temptation, sin, and ultimately death.
The downfall of humanity. That makes sense. There are also some unexpected elements in this fresco, like musical instruments. Why would Michelangelo include those in such a serious scene?
Well, musical instruments are often associated with ceremony, with marking important events, so in a way, they're there to highlight the momentous nature of the Last Judgment.
Like announcing the final verdict.
Exactly. But remember, as we saw with the still lifes, musical instruments can also represent earthly pleasures, so there's this interesting tension there.
Like a reminder of what's being left behind. We also see a lot of crosses in the fresco.
Right, and those are very clearly symbols of Christianity, sacrifice, redemption, the hope of resurrection.
A counterpoint to the despair on the other side. And I noticed that the figures are often arranged in circular patterns. Is there a reason for that?
Circles often represent wholeness, eternity, and the divine. So those circular groupings could symbolize the eternal nature of God's judgment.
And the figure supporting columns. What do you make of that?
That's a powerful image. It could represent humanity's burden, its connection to the earthly realm. But at the same time, many of those figures are looking upwards towards heaven.
So it's like they're bridging the gap between the earthly and the divine, striving for something more.
Exactly. It's truly amazing how much thought and symbolism Michelangelo packed into this one fresco.
It's mind-blowing. Every detail seems to have a purpose. Okay, so as we've seen, whether it's a simple bowl of fruit or a grand fresco, art is full of hidden meanings.
It's a language waiting to be decoded. And once you start seeing those symbols, the art comes alive in a whole new way.
It's like you're suddenly part of a secret conversation. So listener, next time you encounter a work of art, take a closer look. What symbols do you see?
What stories are they telling?
You might be surprised by what you discover. This deep dive has really only scratched the surface of this fascinating world of artistic symbolism. But hopefully it's given you a new set of eyes, a new way to appreciate the art that surrounds us.
And to understand the power of those silent messages that artists have been whispering for centuries.
Thank you for joining us on The Lonely Star for this exploration into the hidden language of symbols and art. Until our next deep dive into the unknown. Goodbye. The truth is stranger than fiction.